C# is faster than GDScript when you're making a game in Godot. That's what people say, but is it true? Since last week I messed around with making my first project in just GDScript and I really enjoyed it, I was curious to see if I was missing out on anything and how much in terms of performance by switching to GDScript. So I wrote some tests. I'll drop the link to the public GitHub in the description so you can fork it, follow along, try out your own. I wrote some kind of interesting test infrastructure that let me run tests quickly against a bunch of different sizes of data. So here I've made a really small test. The idea is to just render some number of tiles. We go from 100 to 10,000. And it works the same in C# and GDScript. So what we do is we grab a resource, we will instantiate it, add it as a child of this node, and then position it. Same in C#. This is something we do in every game, any genre, and it's dead simple. So the interesting thing here is when we run this, the C# is actually a bit slower, not much slower, but it's interesting that it is slower. So maybe this is something to do with integration with the engine or something. Next one was inspired by making a copy of a generic litigious arcade game about falling blocks. We're going to go up to 500,000 N here and rotate shapes of that size. So these are all shapes made out of a series of vector to integers, and we run this really simple rotation matrix on them up to N times. And that's how we get the outcome here, and it's the same in C#, though the linting is bad when you don't have VS Code here. So let's run this, and we get a really big difference here. So GDScript seems to have a little less overhead to make that first call. Like, it tends to be quicker for a very small n, but then when you get to very large n's, C# is much faster, and this is a huge difference. So maybe think about this if you're going to be rotating very large shapes with lots of data. Quick caveat about that though, because if you are doing those rotations on your GPU, usually with a 3D shape or something that you're just rotating using a transform or something in your game, that will be different. That's not run off of GDScript or C#. That's all run on your GPU, and GPUs are specialized to run this kind of math very fast. So don't worry about that. Only worry about this if you were doing rotations on your CPU for some sort of data validation stuff like I did when I was working on that arcade game. So the next one is a classic, I suppose. We're just going to generate a bunch of numbers. I'm calling these scores because I was working on an arcade game before. But we're going to generate randomly n numbers, and then we're going to sort them. So this should work about the same in C# and in GDScript. We're both using the Godot random number generator. And yeah, we're using a link order by for C#, and then we're using just the sort that comes with GDScript. And when we run this, we have very similar outcomes to what we experienced with the last one. So it looks like for very small 10,000 numbers, they're very similar. As you get very large, C# is much faster for dealing with that size of data. All right, so the last test I ran, I just wanted to make a big array of numbers and then run a test to check if there were any zeros. I won't include any zeros, so it's kind of a worst case where I would have to check them all. Anyways, we do that pretty quickly here with the row.all function here, or the .all. And then in C# we also have an all function. So really very similar code. We can run this from main here. And they're both super fast. This is a barely anything operation, apparently, even with 2 million N. So that's interesting to know. So this isn't actually much of a difference, really, which is kind of interesting. So should you swap to C# to get some performance increases? Well, probably not. It seems like most engine calls are approximately the same, or maybe even a bit snappier if you're running them from GDScript. I'm not exactly sure why. If you're dealing with really large arrays of data and you want to run a bunch of math on them, C# might give you some performance improvements, so that might be worth looking into. But a lot of our games don't have that need, or might have that need but only for tens or hundreds of things, and in that case I don't think that the difference is big enough to matter. On the other hand, if you are dealing with maybe a grid tile map that's 100 by 100, you've got 10,000 tiles there, and that is a number where if you're running some very quick math, it is going to make a difference, though you may want to consider not running that math as much as possible for performance. What does matter though is what you feel happy coding in, what you're more productive in. So pick that probably. There are a lot of other places to look for optimizations too. Having more optimized 3D models or textures, that kind of thing, can have a much more noticeable impact on your game. Okay, well, thank you. Have a great day.